In this video, we take a look at the profile of the late Wangari Maathai. Professor Wangari Maathai was the first African woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize and the first woman in East Africa to earn a doctorate, gaining a PhD from the University of Nairobi. This is the story of a visionary, a revolutionist, an environmentalist, and a great leader. This is the story of Professor Wangari Maathai. Wangari Maathai, whose full name is Wangari Muta Maathai, was born on 1st April 1940 in the village of Ihithe, Nyeri district in the Central Highlands of Kenya. For her primary education, Wangari Maathai went to St. Cecilia's Intermediate Primary School, a boarding school at the Maathai Catholic Mission in Nyeri. Studying at St. Cecilia's, she was sheltered from the Mau Mau uprising. When she completed her primary school, she was granted admission to Loreto High School in Limuru, the only Catholic high school for girls in Kenya then. John F. Kennedy, then a United States Senator, through the John P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation, initiated what became known as the Kennedy Airlift or Airlift Africa. Maathai became one of some 300 Kenyans selected to study in the United States in September 1960. As a beneficiary of the scholarship program, she earned a bachelor's degree majoring in biology at Mount Scholastica and a master's degree from the University of Pittsburgh when she graduated with a master's in biological sciences. She went on to become the first woman in East and Central Africa to become a doctor of philosophy, receiving her PhD from the University of Nairobi in Kenya. Professor Maathai became chair of the Department of Veterinary Anatomy and an associate professor in 1976 and 1977 respectively. In both cases, she was the first woman to attain those positions in the region. In April 1966, she met Mwangi Maathai, another Kenyan who had studied in America, who would later become her husband. Together, they sired 3 children. Maathai and her husband, Mwangi Maathai, separated in 1977. After a lengthy separation, Mwangi filed for divorce in 1979. He was said to have believed that Wangari was too strong-minded for women and that he was unable to control her. Shortly after the divorce, her former husband sent a letter via his lawyer demanding that Maathai drop his surname. She chose to add an extra A instead of changing her name. The Green Belt movement began as a project of the National Council of Women of Kenya, NCWK, which she was a member. While working with NCWK, Maathai developed the idea that village women could improve the environment by planting trees to provide a fuel source and to slow the processes of deforestation. On 5th June 1977, marking World Environment Day, NCWK marched in a procession from KICC in downtown Nairobi to Kamukunji Park in the outskirts of the city, where they planted 7 trees in honor of historical community leaders. This was the first event of the Green Belt movement. Through the movement, she mobilized thousands of women and men to plant tens of millions of trees throughout Kenya. The approach was practical, holistic, and deeply ecological. In 1986, with funding from UNEP, the movement expanded throughout Africa and led to the foundation of the Pan-African Green Belt Network. The Green Belt Movement, an organization she founded in 1977, had by the early 21st century planted some 30 million trees. In the latter half of the 1980s, the Kenyan government came down against Maathai and the Green Belt Movement. The single-party regime opposed many of the movement's positions regarding democratic rights. The government invoked a colonial-era law prohibiting groups of more than 9 people from meeting without a government license. In 1988, the Green Belt movement carried out pro-democracy activities such as registering voters for the election and pressing for constitutional reform and freedom of expression. In October 1989, Maathai learned of a plan to construct the 60-story Kenya Times Media Trust complex in Uhuru Park. The complex was intended to house the headquarters of KANU, the Kenya Times newspaper, a trading center, offices, an auditorium, galleries, shopping malls, and parking space for 2,000 cars. The plan also included a large statue of the late President Daniel Arap Moi. Maathai wrote many letters in protest, including to Sir John Johnson, the then British High Commissioner in Nairobi at the time, urging him to intervene with Robert Maxwell, a major shareholder in the project. The government refused to respond to her inquiries and protest, instead responding through the media that Maathai was a crazy woman, that denying the project in Uhuru Park would take more than a small portion of the public park land, and proclaiming the project as a fine and magnificent work of architecture. Despite Maathai's protest, as well as popular protests growing throughout the city, the ground was broken at Uhuru Park for construction of the complex on 15 November 1989. Maathai sought an injunction in the Kenya High Court to halt construction, but the case was thrown out on 11 December. On 12 December in Uhuru Park, during a speech celebrating independence from the British, President Daniel Moi suggested Maathai be a proper woman in the African tradition and respect men and be quiet. She was forced by the government to vacate her office and the Greenbelt movement was moved into her home. The government audited the Greenbelt movement in the apparent attempt to shut it down. Despite the government's efforts, her protest and media coverage led foreign investors to cancel the project in January 1990. In January 1992, it came to the attention of Maathai and other pro-democracy activists that a list of people were targeted for assassination and that a government-sponsored coup was possible. Maathai's name was on the list. The pro-democracy group, known as the Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, FORD, presented its information to the media, calling for a general election. Later that day, Maathai received a warning that one of the members had been arrested. Maathai decided to barricade herself in her home. Shortly thereafter, police arrived and surrounded the house. She was besieged for 3 days before police cut through the bars she had installed on her windows, came in and arrested her. She and other pro-democracy activists who had been arrested were charged with spreading malicious rumors, sedition and treason. After a day and a half in jail, they were brought to a hearing and released on bail. Due to pressure from many sources, the Kenyan government dropped the charges. On 28 February 1992, while released on bail, Maathai and others took part in a hunger strike in a corner of Uhuru Park, which they labeled Freedom Corner, to pressure the government to release political prisoners. After 4 days of hunger strike, on 3 March 1992, the police forcibly removed the protesters. Maathai and 3 others were knocked unconscious by police and hospitalized. The attack drew international criticism. When the prisoners were not released, the protesters, mostly mothers of those in prison, moved their protest to All Saints Cathedral, the seat of the Anglican Archbishop in Kenya, across from Uhuru Park. The protest there continued, with Maathai contributing frequently until early 1993 when the prisoners were finally released. In June 1992, during the long protest at Uhuru Park, both Maathai and President Arap Moi traveled to Rio de Janeiro from the UN Conference on Environment and Development Summit. The Kenyan government accused Maathai of inciting women and encouraging them to strip at Freedom Corner, urging that she not be allowed to speak at the summit. Despite this, Maathai was chosen to be a chief spokesperson at the summit. In 1997, during the elections, Maathai again wished to unite the opposition in order to defeat the ruling party. Less than 2 months before the election, she decided to run for parliament and for president as a candidate of the Liberal Party. On the day of the election, a rumor that Maathai had withdrawn from the election and endorsed another candidate was printed in the media. Maathai garnered few votes and lost the election. In 1998, Maathai learned of a government plan to privatize large areas of public land in the Karura forest just outside Nairobi and give it to political supporters. Maathai protested this through letters to the government and the press. She went with the Greenbelt movement to Karura forest, planting trees and protesting the destruction of the forest. On 8 January 1999, a group of protesters, including Maathai, 6 opposition members of parliament, journalists, international observers, and Greenbelt members and supporters returned to the forest to plant a tree in protest. The entry to the forest was guarded by a large group of men. When she tried to plant a tree in the area that had been designated to be cleared for a golf course, the group was attacked. Maathai again campaigned for parliament in 2002 elections, this time as a candidate of the National Rainbow Coalition, the umbrella coalition which finally united the opposition. On 27 December 2002, the Rainbow Coalition defeated the ruling party, the Kenyan African National Union (KANU), and in Tetu constituency, Maathai won with an overwhelming 98% of the vote. She was then appointed Assistant Minister in the Ministry for Environment and Natural Resources and served in that capacity until November 2005. In 2004, Wangari Maathai was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her contribution to sustainable development, democracy and peace. Maathai was the first African woman to win the prestigious award. Through her significant efforts, Wangari Maathai became the first African woman and the first environmentalist to win the Peace Prize. The following year, 2006, she founded the Nobel Women's Initiative with her sister Laureates, Jody Williams, Shireen Ebadi, Menchu Tan, Betty Williams, and Myreed Corrigan. In November 2007, Wangari Maathai was defeated in the Party of National Unity's PNU's primary elections for its parliamentary candidates, and she chose to vie on a similar party ticket but lost the elections. Wangari Maathai authored 4 books, The Green Belt Movement and Bowed, a memoir, The Challenge for Africa and Replenishing the Earth. As well as having been featured in several books, she and the Green Belt Movement were the subject of a documentary film taking root, The Vision of Wangari Maathai. Wangari Maathai died on 25 September 2011 of complications arising from ovarian cancer while receiving treatment at a Nairobi hospital. She is buried at the Wangari Maathai Institute for Peace and Environmental Studies in Nairobi. Professor Wangari Maathai, the legacy is exemplary of how one person can be a force for change. What are your thoughts on the late Professor Wangari Maathai? Let us know in the comment section. Thank you for watching.